Everyone has been rejected at least once, but imagine being laughed at, judged, and turned away again and again just because you look poor. Imagine carrying that pain quietly while hiding a truth that could change everything. This is not just a love story. This is a test of hearts, and the moment the truth is revealed, nothing will ever be the same. He walked slowly through the busy street, his shoes worn thin, his shirt faded and torn at the elbows. People passed him without a second glance, some pulling their bags closer, others whispering behind his back. To them, he was just another poor man with no future. His name was Ion, and he had learned long ago that appearance spoke louder than character in this world. Ion had once lived in a mansion with marble floors and silent servants. He had money, influence, and a family name that opened doors without knocking. But that life had also shown him something ugly. Every woman his family introduced smiled too quickly at his watch, his car, his status. Their eyes shone not with love, but with calculation. Compliments felt rehearsed. Promises felt empty. And one night, sitting alone in his expensive bedroom, Ion realized he was surrounded by comfort but starving for something real. So, he made a decision that shocked even himself. He would walk away from wealth, at least for a while, and see the world as it truly was. He dressed in simple clothes, left his car behind, and rented a small room in an old part of the city. He told no one who he really was. He wanted to know one thing. If he had nothing, would anyone still choose him? The first rejection came quickly. He met a woman at a cafe, where he ordered only tea. When she asked what he did, he spoke honestly but simply, saying he was between jobs. Her smile froze. Within minutes, she checked her phone and left, never replying to his messages again. Ion sat there, staring at the empty chair, feeling a quiet ache settle in his chest. More rejections followed. Some were polite, others cruel. One woman laughed openly when she saw his room. Another told him directly, "I can't waste my life with a man who can't provide." Each word cut deeper, not because they were false, but because they were honest reflections of how the world judged him. At night, he lay awake listening to the sounds of the city, wondering if his test was foolish, if love without conditions even existed. His friends from his old life would not recognize him now. The man who once commanded rooms now stood silently in corners. Yet, despite the pain, Ion refused to quit. Somewhere inside him was a stubborn hope, a belief that kindness still lived quietly in some hearts, unnoticed by the noise of wealth and status. One evening, rain began to fall suddenly, heavy and cold. Ion stood under a broken streetlight, watching people rush past. His jacket was thin, and the water soaked through quickly. He noticed a small bookstore across the street, its lights warm against the dark sky. He crossed over and stepped inside, shaking water from his sleeves. Behind the counter stood a young woman, arranging books carefully. She looked up and offered a gentle smile, not forced, not curious, just kind. "You can stay here till the rain slows," she said softly. Her voice carried no judgment, only concern. Ion nodded, surprised by how much that simple sentence meant to him. They talked quietly as the rain continued. Her name was Sarah. She spoke about books she loved, about her late mother who taught her to be gentle in a harsh world, about working long hours to keep the shop running. She asked about him too, and when he spoke of his simple life, she listened without interrupting, without that familiar look of disappointment. When he apologized for not buying anything, she waved it off. "Stories don't always need money," she said with a small laugh. "Sometimes they just need someone to listen." Ion felt something tighten in his throat. No one had spoken to him like that in a very long time. As he left, the rain lighter now, Sarah handed him a cup of warm tea in a paper cup.
"For the road," she said.
He thanked her, his voice unsteady, and stepped back into the night. Walking away, he realized his heart felt lighter, not because he was loved, but because he was seen. He didn't know it yet, but that brief moment inside a quiet bookstore was the beginning of everything. The test he had set for the world was slowly turning into a test of his own strength. And somewhere ahead, truth waited patiently, ready to change all their lives. Ayan returned to the bookstore the next day, not because he needed shelter from the rain, but because something inside him pulled him there. He told himself it was nothing, just gratitude for the tea, just curiosity. Yet his heart beat faster as he pushed the door open and heard the soft bell ring above it. Sarah looked up from behind the counter and smiled again, the same calm, unmeasured smile, as if she expected nothing from him, and that made her kindness feel rare. He began visiting regularly after that. Sometimes he bought the cheapest book, sometimes he only stood near the shelves, pretending to read while stealing glances at her. They spoke about small things at first: weather, customers, favorite stories. Over time, their conversations deepened naturally, like a river widening without force. Ayan spoke about loneliness without naming wealth. Sarah spoke about responsibility, about how life had taught her to value effort more than promises. What surprised Ayan most was how she treated him exactly the same every day. Whether he came in with tired eyes or worn clothes, whether he bought a book or not, her tone never changed. There was no hidden disappointment, no silent calculation. To her, he was simply Ayan. Nothing more, nothing less. Outside that bookstore, reality was harsher. Ayan still faced judgment everywhere else. Landlords dismissed him. Shopkeepers ignored him. Women he met through acquaintances ended conversations the moment money entered the discussion. Once, a woman glanced at his cracked phone and said, half joking, "You should fix your life before thinking about love." He smiled politely, but that night he sat alone on his bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many times a heart could be bruised before it stopped hoping. Sarah noticed the change in him before he spoke of it. One evening, as they closed the shop together, she asked gently, "You seem tired." Not just physically. Her words were careful, not invasive. Ayan hesitated, then laughed softly. "Maybe I am," he said. He wanted to tell her everything. The wealth, the test, the truth. But fear stopped him. Fear that even her kindness might change if she knew. Instead, he told her fragments. That he had lost faith in people. That he was searching for something honest. She listened quietly, then said, "Honest things take time. And pain. But they're worth it." There was no advice in her voice, only understanding. That night, Ayan walked home feeling both comforted and conflicted. He was falling for her, and that terrified him more than rejection ever had. Weeks passed. Their bond grew stronger, woven from shared silences and soft laughter. Sarah never asked him for anything, never hinted at expectations. When he apologized for not being able to take her to nice places, she shrugged. "I like walks," she said, "and tea tastes the same anywhere." Each word felt like a quiet challenge to the world that had shaped him. But tests have a way of revealing truth in cruel ways. One afternoon, a well-dressed man entered the bookstore, his presence sharp and commanding. He looked around with mild disdain before approaching the counter. "I'm here about Sarah," he said. "I'd like to speak to her father." Sarah stiffened slightly. Ayan noticed. The man glanced at Ayan, then dismissed him with a look. "This is family business," he said coldly. Later, Sarah explained. The man was a distant relative who believed she should marry into wealth to secure her future. He had offered introductions, connections, comfort. "He thinks kindness doesn't pay bills," she said quietly. Ayan felt a familiar anger rise, but also fear. What if Sarah eventually believed the same? What if love wasn't enough? That night, Ion stood before a mirror in his small room, staring at the man he had become. He had started this journey to protect himself from shallow love, but now he was risking something deeper. For the first time, he questioned whether he was being fair. Was testing the world also testing Sarah without her consent? The next day, he almost told her the truth. Almost. The words sat heavy on his tongue as they walked through a park, leaves crunching beneath their feet. But before he could speak, she stopped and looked at him. "Whatever you're searching for," she said, "I hope you find peace. With or without me." Her honesty struck him harder than any rejection. Ion realized then that love was no longer an experiment. It was a responsibility, and the truth he was hiding was becoming heavier with every heartbeat. The path ahead was narrowing, and soon, he would have to choose between revealing everything or losing the only person who had seen him when he had nothing. The weight of truth followed Ion everywhere after that walk in the park. It sat beside him in the bookstore, lingered in the pauses of their conversations, and haunted him during sleepless nights. He had never imagined that pretending to be poor would become harder than being judged for it. With Sarah, every laugh felt real, and every silence felt dangerous, because silence was where lies quietly grew. He started noticing details about her that made his chest ache. The way she tied her hair when she was nervous. How she spoke gently even to rude customers. How she counted every expense carefully, yet still found ways to help people who needed it more than she did. Once, an elderly man came into the shop asking for a book he couldn't afford. Sarah packed it anyway and said, "You can pay me later." When the man left, Ion asked why she trusted so easily. She smiled sadly and said, "Because life has trusted me very little. I don't want to be the same." Those words shook him. Sarah was living the very values he was searching for, without tests, without disguises. Meanwhile, he was hiding behind torn clothes and half-truths. For the first time, guilt outweighed fear. He began to wonder if the real test was not for others but for him. Could he be honest and still be loved? Trouble arrived sooner than he expected. One afternoon, Ion noticed a black luxury car parked across the street from the bookstore. It didn't belong there. Later, he saw Sarah speaking to a sharply dressed woman outside, her shoulders tense. When Sarah returned inside, her smile was forced. "My aunt," she explained. "She thinks I deserve better." The word better hung in the air, heavy and familiar. That evening, Sarah finally spoke openly. Her relatives had arranged a meeting with a wealthy businessman's son. They believed it was her chance to escape struggle. "They say love can come later," she said quietly. "First comes security." Ion listened, his heart pounding. He wanted to scream that security was an illusion, that money didn't guarantee happiness. But he also knew he was the worst person to argue, considering his secret. "Do you want it?" he asked carefully. Sarah looked at him, surprised. "I want peace," she said. "I want respect. I want someone who won't measure my worth by my circumstances." Her eyes searched his face, as if looking for reassurance he wasn't brave enough to give. After that night, distance crept between them. Not in words, but in rhythm. Conversations were shorter. Smiles arrived later. Ion sensed that the world was closing in, forcing choices neither of them wanted to make. He felt time slipping through his fingers, and with it, the chance to be honest. The breaking point came unexpectedly. One morning, as Ion walked toward the bookstore, he saw a small crowd gathered near the entrance. Sarah was standing there, arguing with her aunt and the same relative from before. Their voices were sharp, careless. "Look at you," the man said loudly. "Working in a shop, wasting your youth. And this." He pointed at Ayan. This is what you choose. A man who can't even afford decent clothes? People stared. Ayan felt heat rush to his face, but before he could speak, Sarah stepped forward. Stop, she said firmly. You don't get to talk about him like that. Her voice trembled, but she didn't back down. He treats me with more respect than any rich man you've shown me. The words hit Ayan like a storm. She was defending him. Publicly. Without knowing the truth. Shame and gratitude collided inside him. The relatives scoffed and walked away, leaving whispers behind them. Sarah turned to Ayan, her eyes glossy but determined. I'm sorry you had to hear that, she said. You didn't deserve it. That was the moment Ayan knew he couldn't continue the lie. Not after she chose him when he had nothing to offer. Not after she stood between him and humiliation without hesitation. That night, he asked her to meet him somewhere quiet. His voice shook when he called. Sarah agreed, sensing the seriousness in his tone. They met at a small park bench under dim lights. Ayan sat stiffly, hands clenched. There's something I need to tell you, he began. His heart hammered so loudly, he wondered if she could hear it. He spoke slowly, carefully, revealing fragments of his past. The wealth, the family, the decision to walk away and test the world. He didn't dramatize it. He didn't justify it. He simply told the truth. When he finished, silence fell between them. Sarah stared at the ground, her expression unreadable. Every second felt like punishment. Finally, she looked up. There was hurt in her eyes, and confusion, and something else he couldn't name yet. So, she said softly, this was all a test. Ayan swallowed hard. At first, he admitted, but then it became real. You became real. His voice broke. And I'm sorry. Sarah stood up slowly. I need time, she said. Not anger, not tears. Just honesty. She walked away, leaving Ayan alone on the bench, realizing that revealing the truth didn't guarantee forgiveness. Sometimes, it only opened the door to a harder kind of waiting. Days passed after that night, each one heavier than the last. Ayan did not go to the bookstore. He didn't call. He didn't send messages filled with explanations or apologies. For the first time in his life, he understood that real respect sometimes meant silence. He had given Sarah the truth, and now the choice belonged to her. Still, every morning he woke with a tight chest, wondering if honesty had cost him the one thing that mattered most. Sarah, on the other hand, lived in a storm of thoughts. She felt betrayed, not because Ayan was rich, but because he had hidden himself. Every memory replayed in her mind with new colors. The torn clothes, the quiet sadness, the way he listened. She questioned what was real and what was part of the test. Yet no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't erase one truth. The man she had known had treated her with genuine respect when he believed he had nothing to gain. Her relatives wasted no time. Seeing her shaken, they pushed harder. Meetings were arranged. Promises were made. Comfort was placed in front of her like bait. One wealthy man spoke proudly about cars and properties, barely asking her a single question. As he talked, Sarah found herself thinking of Ayan sitting silently, listening to her stories as if they mattered. The contrast made her feel hollow. Ayan returned to the small room he had rented, surrounded by the life he had chosen for his test. For the first time, it felt unbearable. The simplicity that once gave him clarity now felt like punishment. He thought about ending the experiment, returning to his old life, letting this chapter close quietly. But every time he imagined leaving without knowing Sarah's decision, his heart resisted. Love, he realized, did not end neatly. One evening his phone rang. It was his mother. He had avoided her calls for months. When he finally answered, her voice cracked with relief. She had heard rumors about him, about his strange disappearance from society. Ayan told her everything.
The test.
The rejections.
Sarah.
There was a long pause on the other end. Then his mother said softly, "If she loved you when you had nothing, don't fight her honesty now. Let her see all of you." Those words stayed with him. The next day, Ayan made a decision. He would stop hiding. Not to impress, not to pressure, but to stand openly as who he truly was. He dressed neatly, not extravagantly, and went to the bookstore. Sarah wasn't there. The shop was closed early. A small note on the door read, "Closed today. Family matters." That night, Sarah confronted her relatives. Calmly, firmly, she told them she would not marry for security alone. They laughed, calling her naive. One of them revealed Ayan's background mockingly, assuming it would change her mind.
"He's rich," they said.
"Isn't that what you want?" Sarah felt anger rise. "If that's all he was," she replied, "I wouldn't care at all." She realized then that her hurt was not about money. It was about trust. She needed to see Ayan again, not as a poor man, not as a rich one, but as someone willing to be vulnerable without tests or walls. The next day, she asked him to meet her. They met in the same park where the truth had been revealed. The air was quiet. Ayan stood when he saw her, unsure whether to step closer. Sarah spoke first. She told him how confused she had been, how betrayed and yet conflicted. "You tested the world," she said, "but you also tested me without asking." Ayan nodded. "I know. And whatever you decide, I accept it." He didn't defend himself. He didn't promise luxury. He only said, "I don't want to be chosen for my money or my poverty. I want to be chosen for my honesty." And I failed at that first. Sarah studied his face. There was no arrogance there. No expectation. Just remorse and patience. Slowly she spoke. "The man I defended that day," she said, "was kind, humble, and real. If that man still exists without the disguise, then maybe there's something worth saving." Ayan felt his breath catch. She wasn't forgiving him yet, but she wasn't walking away either. It was a fragile bridge, built not on grand gestures, but on accountability. They agreed to start again, slowly, with no tests, no pretending, no secrets. But the world wasn't done with them. News traveled fast. When people learned who Ayan really was, reactions were explosive. The same women who once ignored him now messaged him eagerly. The same people who laughed now praised his simplicity. Watching this unfold, Sarah felt a strange calm. Their hypocrisy confirmed everything. One evening, as they walked together, Sarah said quietly, "Now everyone sees your worth. But I saw you before." Ayan stopped and looked at her, eyes full. He knew then that whatever happened next, the lesson was already written. True love was never fooled by appearances, and neither was true character. The final change did not arrive with fireworks or dramatic announcements. It came quietly, the way real truths often do. Ayan stopped pretending completely. He moved out of the small room, not back into luxury, but into a simple apartment of his own choosing. He didn't buy flashy clothes or cars. He returned to his family, but on his own terms, making it clear that his life and his heart would no longer be guided by expectations or image. Sarah watched this transformation carefully. What mattered to her was not that Ayan was rich, but that he no longer hid behind extremes. He was no longer testing the world, and he was no longer running from it. He showed up honestly, every day, patient with her hesitation, respectful of her boundaries. When doubts surfaced, he listened instead of explaining. When trust wavered, He waited instead of pushing. Slowly, the cracks left by deception began to heal. The world, however, reacted exactly as Ion had predicted. Old acquaintances suddenly remembered his name. Women who once dismissed him now laughed loudly at his jokes. Invitations poured in. Compliments flowed freely. Watching this, Sarah felt both anger and clarity. One evening, after a particularly uncomfortable social event, she asked Ion, "Does it hurt, knowing how quickly people change?" He nodded. "It used to. Now it just reminds me why I walked away in the first place." The final test came unexpectedly, not from society, but from circumstance. Sarah's bookstore faced closure. Rising rent and unpaid loans threatened everything she had worked for. Ion knew he could solve the problem instantly with money. But he hesitated, remembering the promise they made. No tests. No power imbalance. Just honesty. When he offered help, he did it carefully. "I can support the shop," he said, "but only if you're comfortable, and only as a partnership, not a rescue." Sarah thought long and hard before agreeing. What mattered was not the money, but the respect in his approach. Together, they rebuilt the bookstore, expanding it slowly, keeping its soul intact. Ion worked alongside her, not above her. News of their partnership spread. People whispered. Some admired. Others accused Sarah of staying only for wealth. One afternoon, a woman from Ion's past confronted her directly. "Be honest," she said sharply. "If you were still poor, would you be here?" Sarah didn't raise her voice. She simply replied, "If he were still pretending, I wouldn't be." Those words reached Ion later that day, and he stood alone for a long time, overwhelmed by gratitude. He realized that love had not arrived when the truth came out, but when responsibility followed it. Sarah wasn't impressed by his riches. She was reassured by his consistency. The moment that shocked everyone came months later at a family gathering. Relatives who once mocked Ion praised his humility and vision. They spoke proudly of his experiment, treating it like a clever strategy. Ion listened silently, then stood up. "It wasn't a strategy," he said calmly. "It was a mistake that taught me something." The room fell quiet. "The only person who passed any test," he continued, "is the woman who chose me when I had nothing and still chose honesty when I had everything." He turned to Sarah, not with a ring or a grand speech, but with steady eyes. "I don't promise a perfect life," he said, "but I promise no disguises." Sarah didn't answer immediately. She stepped forward, took his hand, and said, "That's all I ever wanted." Gasps filled the room. Some faces burned with shame, others with disbelief. Their love did not become a fairy tale overnight. They argued. They learned. They grew. But every challenge reinforced the same truth. Wealth could attract attention. Poverty could repel it. But character remained when both were stripped away. Years later, people would still tell the story. About the man who dressed poor to test the world. About the woman who treated him with dignity before knowing his worth. Some would admire it. Others would doubt it. But those who listened closely understood the real lesson. True love is not proven when everything is revealed. It is proven when respect exists before revelation and remains after it. And in a world obsessed with appearances, two people chose honesty, and that choice changed everything. If this story touched your heart, remember this one simple truth. People will always judge by what they see, but real love is revealed by how someone treats you when you have nothing to offer. Money can attract attention, status can open doors, but only character keeps someone standing beside you when there is no reward in sight. Ion didn't find love because he was rich. He found it because one woman saw his humanity before his success. And Sarah didn't choose him for comfort or security. She chose honesty, respect, and consistency. In the end, that choice became stronger than any test. So before you judge someone by their clothes, their job, or their bank balance, pause for a moment. You never know what kind of heart is hidden behind a simple appearance. True love is never fooled by wealth or poverty. It recognizes sincerity, even in silence. If you believe love should be built on respect, not riches, then this story is for you. Like, share, and subscribe, because stories like these remind us that the richest thing anyone can have is a genuine heart.